Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're heading to Myanmar.
Looking specifically at the December 12th issue of Mizzima Weekly.
Yeah, this is a publication that maybe some people haven't heard of.
It's an independent weekly magazine
Oh, interesting.
published out of Prague.
Okay, so not actually in Myanmar.
No, and edited by Somyan, who's a veteran journalist
Hmm.
who's really committed to independent reporting on the crisis in Myanmar.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot, obviously, about the importance of independent media, and this is a great example of that.
Exactly.
Based outside the country,
Yeah.
but still shining a light on what's happening there.
Exactly.
And this issue is really interesting because it's got like a broad range.
It does.
It's not just straight news. It's
It's a good overview of kind of everything that's happening right now.
yeah, so we've got political analysis updates from the ground stuff about international relations, even a little bit of cultural news.
Yeah, they do a good job of kind of highlighting the different facets of what's happening.
Yeah, so I thought maybe we could kind of jump right in. And there's one article title that really caught my eye,
Okay.
which is The Assad Effect.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to read that
I
one?
did, yeah. It's the Assad effect. Syrian leaders' rapid exit sparks Myanmar hope that their dictator's days are numbered.
So what are they talking about there? I mean, it sounds like they're comparing what happened in Syria
Exactly.
to what's going on in Myanmar.
Yeah, and on Myanmar social media, it's been sparking a lot of hope,
I can imagine.
that Assad was overthrown so quickly.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of Western analysts by surprise.
Yeah, and so now they're kind of looking at Myanmar and thinking, okay, maybe the same thing could happen here.
Exactly. And I think the article does a good job of balancing that hope
Okay.
with, cautioning against just simplistic comparisons.
Right, because, I mean, even just thinking about the geography of the two countries, Syria is largely desert.
Mm-hmm.
Myanmar's got jungles and mountains
Yeah.
and deltas.
It's very diverse terrain. Yeah.
I mean, just on a basic level, like, that has to affect how any conflict would play out.
Absolutely. And, the article highlights this as a key difference between the two conflicts.
Okay, so it's not just like, oh, well, Assad was overthrown quickly, so Min Aung Hlaing could be too.
Yeah.
It's actually like there's some pretty fundamental differences here.
Yeah. I mean, you can imagine, running a military campaign through the desert
Right.
is very different than trying to move troops through the jungle.
Yeah, it's like sprinting across an open field versus like bushwhacking through dense forest.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, so the geography is one thing. What about like the groups involved?
Right. So in Syria, you had a very fractured opposition, lots of different groups with different agendas, heavily reliant on foreign aid.
Okay,
Whereas in Myanmar, you have a much more cohesive opposition
interesting.
with the EAOs, the ethnic armed organizations, and the PDFs, the People's Defense Forces.
So they're more united in their goal of opposing the junta.
Okay, but then wouldn't you say that Myanmar's military is also probably stronger than what Assad was facing at the end?
That's another key difference that the article highlights.
Okay.
The junta still has a relatively strong military.
Okay, and then there's also the whole issue of foreign support, right?
So both?
Because Assad was able to hold on for so long, partly because of backing from Russia and Iran.
Yeah, but that support eventually dwindled.
Right, whereas in Myanmar, you've got China and Russia both still backing the junta.
Yeah, and that makes applying international pressure a lot harder.
Yeah, because you can put sanctions on Myanmar, but if China's still willing to trade with them and provide support, it kind of undermines the whole thing.
Exactly, and it raises the question of, what is China's end game here?
Yeah, why are they so invested in propping up this regime?
Well, Myanmar's strategically very important to China.
How so?
It gives them access to the Indian Ocean,
Oh, I see.
and they've invested heavily in infrastructure projects, pipelines. So they're basically looking out for their own interests, even if it means supporting a regime that's committing human rights abuses.
It seems that way, and the article does point out that China has been cracking down on resistance groups in northern Shan State.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've been implementing something called the Five Cuts policy.
5 cuts policy, what's that?
So basically, they cut off electricity, internet access, fuel supplies, transportation, and financial flows.
Wow, that's intense.
It's a very harsh measure.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're really trying to squeeze the resistance there.
They are, but the article also mentions that China has been reaching out to some EAOs.
Oh, interesting.
So it seems like they might be trying to play both sides.
Maybe hedging their bets.
Exactly.
Trying to find a way to ensure stability in the region that also benefits their interests.
It's a complex situation.
Definitely a lot to unpack there. And it makes me wonder, what do you think about all this, listener?
Yeah. What do you make of China's role in all of this?
It's clear that the situation in Myanmar is way more complicated than a simple comparison to Syria would suggest.
Right, and that's why publications like Mizzima Weekly are so important.
Yeah, because they give us a deeper understanding of the nuances of what's happening.
Exactly.
So I'm actually really curious to hear about some of the other stories in this issue.
Yeah, let's dive into those. So one of the things that really struck me in this issue was an article about people with disabilities in Myanmar
Oh, wow.
and how, they've been disproportionately affected by all of this.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to forget about, those who are already facing challenges
Right.
when you're talking about a crisis of this scale.
Exactly. And the article points out that, something like 15% of displaced and crisis-affected people are persons with disabilities.
Wow, that's a big number.
It is. And it really highlights the need for, more inclusive aid efforts.
Yeah, and specifically, focusing on women and girls with disabilities.
Absolutely. They're even more vulnerable in these situations.
Right. And it's not just, the direct effects of the conflict either.
No.
You've also got things like the Junta's conscription drive.
Right.
Which is now targeting women, too.
Yeah, that's putting a lot of pressure on families.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you think about the economic impact as well.
Right.
Skilled workers are fleeing the country.
They're going to places like Thailand and China.
Yeah, where they can earn, double the wages.
It's a brain drain, essentially.
It is. And it kind of reminds me of what we were talking about earlier with the Assad regime.
How so?
Well, a weakened military and a shrinking workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Those are both things that can really put pressure on a regime.
Absolutely. It adds to the internal instability.
And speaking of instability, there's also a really interesting article about calls for a ceasefire.
Oh, yeah. From the TNLA and the MNDAA.
Right. Those are two of the ethnic armed organizations.
Yeah.
And they're basically saying, hey, let's try to find a peaceful solution.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Junta hasn't officially responded to these calls.
Oh, really? And they've actually continued their offensives in those areas.
So no sign of backing down there?
Not really, but
Yeah.
on the other hand, China has welcomed the calls for peace.
Huh. So they're publicly supporting peace talks, but at the same time, they're still, applying economic pressure in the region.
Exactly. It's kind of a mixed message.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to walk this tightrope
Right.
between, supporting stability,
Mm-hmm.
but also protecting their own interests.
Exactly. They've got a lot invested in Myanmar.
Yeah, and unfortunately, while all this is going on, the humanitarian crisis is just getting worse.
It is. And, one story that really got to me was about the death of a political prisoner.
Oh, gosh.
He was on death row, and he died from inadequate medical care.
How awful.
He was only 34 years old.
That's so young.
He was battling kidney disease and pneumonia.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's just a reminder of the human cost of this conflict.
It is. And thankfully, you've got groups like AAPP and CHRO.
Right. The Assistance Association for Political Prisoners.
Yeah.
And the Chin Human Rights Organization.
Yes.
They're doing incredible work
Yes.
to document these human rights violations.
Your work is so
Yeah.
important.
Making sure that these stories don't get forgotten.
Absolutely.
Shining a light on what's happening.
Holding those responsible accountable.
But, hey, before we move on, I did want to share a bit of good news.
Okay, let's hear it.
Myanmar's traditional Thingian Water Festival
Oh, yeah.
has been added to UNESCO's World Intangible Cultural Heritage List.
That's wonderful.
Isn't that great?
I love that festival.
It's such a vibrant celebration.
full of joy.
Yeah, and it's nice to have, a bit of positive news amidst all of this.
It is a reminder that even in times of conflict, culture can endure.
Absolutely.
The spirit of the people lives on.
I think it speaks to the resilience of the Myanmar people,
Absolutely.
their determination to hold on to their traditions.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
So we've covered a lot of heavy stuff today. But I think it's important for people to understand the full scope of what's happening in Myanmar.
I agree.
It's not just a political crisis.
It's a human tragedy.
It is, but it's also a story of resilience
Of courage.
and a deep desire for freedom.
And that's why publications like Mizzima Weekly are so valuable.
Absolutely.
They give us a window into these complexities.
Yeah, they allow us to connect with the human stories behind the headlines.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, there's one more story I wanted to touch on.
Okay, what is it?
And this one takes us into the realm of international affairs.
Lead the way.
This article focuses on crimes against journalists in Asia.
It's a really concerning trend.
Yeah, and they highlight several cases that are just really disturbing.
Like what's happening in Myanmar, for example.
Right. They talk about two journalists, Tet Mayat Thu and Win Tut Oo,
Who were shot dead by Junta soldiers.
while they were reporting on the ground.
It's just a stark reminder of the dangers that journalists face in these kinds of situations.
Yeah. And, it's not just Myanmar either. They talk about a Vietnamese blogger, Duong Van Tai,
who was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
for creating propaganda against the state.
Which basically means expressing views that the government didn't like.
Right, and he was actually abducted from Thailand,
where he had sought political asylum.
So it shows you the lengths that these regimes will go to.
silence their critics.
Even across borders, they feel threatened by dissenting voices.
Yeah. And then you have Bangladesh.
Right, where several journalists were killed or injured during that unrest this summer.
It's a dangerous profession.
It is, especially when you're covering political events or social movements.
And then there's Victor Mamber in Indonesia,
who's been targeted for his coverage of human rights abuses in Papua.
Molotov cocktails, bomb threats, vandalism.
It's just constant intimidation.
Yeah, and often these attacks go unpunished.
Which just emboldens the perpetrators.
Exactly. It sends the message that it's okay to silence journalists.
And then there's the case of Sun Lin in China,
a dissident journalist who was found dead in his home.
The authorities claim he died during the struggle with police.
But there's evidence to suggest that he was beaten to death.
It's a horrifying thought.
It is, and it highlights the severe restrictions on press freedom in China.
Yeah, they consistently rank among the worst countries in the world for that.
It's a real shame because, transparency and accountability are so important.
For any functioning democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of, contrasting ideals, this issue also has a piece about China's efforts to control cultural narratives.
To rewrite history.
And this is something we've seen happening both within China and beyond its borders.
Yeah, they're really trying to shape the way that people perceive the past.
The article talks about a U.S. congressional hearing,
where activists from different groups testified about this.
Tibetans, Uyghurs, Mongolians, even Han Chinese.
It's a reminder that these issues are not just confined to China.
Right, they have global implications.
Yeah, absolutely.
One activist, Rishat Abbas, shared a really heartbreaking story about his sister Gulshan,
who's imprisoned in China,
on a 20-year sentence.
It's just one example of how the Chinese government uses family members as leverage.
To silence dissent.
It creates this climate of fear.
The hearing also discussed the issue of lawfare,
which is basically using legal means to silence critics.
Like in the case of Stanford University and the diaries of Li Rui.
Right. He was a former Chinese official who became a dissident.
And he donated his diaries to Stanford before he died.
But now his widow, who's based in Beijing, is suing the university to get them back.
And it's pretty clear that the Chinese government is behind this lawsuit.
It's a way of intimidating people.
Saying, hey, even if you're in America,
if you challenge us, you'll face consequences.
And it's working, because now some American institutions are hesitant to acquire materials that might upset the Chinese government.
It's self-censorship.
It really undermines academic freedom.
And then, the activists at the hearing also talked about the need to support cultural preservation efforts.
Especially for languages and traditions that are being suppressed within China.
Right. It's about protecting cultural identity.
Making sure that these unique voices and perspectives aren't lost.
And it really ties back into what we were saying earlier about the importance of publications like Mizzima Weekly.
Giving a platform to independent voices.
Sharing stories that might otherwise go unheard.
Holding those in power accountable.
And ultimately empowering individuals like yourself, listener,
to understand these complex situations and engage in informed discussions.
So we've covered a lot today.
We have, and it's been heavy.
It has, but it's important to be aware of these issues.
And if you've been moved by these stories, we encourage you to support Mizzima Media.
You can subscribe to Mizzima Weekly.
Stay updated on our website at mizzima.com.
Or even consider making a donation.
We'll include all the details in the show notes.
Because staying informed is crucial.
Especially in a world where independent voices are under threat.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, we appreciate you listening, and we'll be back soon with more.
Keep those minds curious.
Those hearts open.
And those voices strong.